As well as being an expert on money matters, did you know that Which also has a team of experts in various aspects of UK law? Which's legal advice service gives its members access to this team, allowing them to call up and get advice on a range of legal matters that impact consumers' everyday lives. And right now, you can join Which Legal and save 30% off the usual annual price. Whether it's a rental dispute, a last-minute holiday cancellation, or legal employment advice, Which can give you personalised, one-to-one advice in a simple, convenient and affordable manner. Don't suffer in silence or suffer the stress of wading through endless streams of online information from unreliable sources. Join Which Legal and speak to one of our experts to get the advice and guidance you need, tailored to you. Plus right now, you can join and get legal support from Which for a whole year for just £69.30. That's a saving of 30%. Just go to legalservice.which.co.uk to find out more, or click the link in the podcast show notes. This offer ends on the 31st of August, so don't miss out.
When life gives you questions, Which? Get answers.
Welcome to the Which Money Podcast, your weekly hit of money news and personal finance hacks to help make you better off. I'm your host, Lucia Ariano, and here's what's coming up this week.
So Section 75 does still apply abroad, which is really good to know. So this means you have that protection if you purchase something more than £100 and up to £30,000, which means that you can reclaim the money from your credit card provider if the retailer doesn't make good.
Also check your travel insurance. You don't want to take out more cash than you're covered for with your policy in case it's lost or stolen.
On today's show, we're going to get you money ready for your summer holiday. There are some golden rules when it comes to spending abroad, and today we'll get you up to speed on everything you need to know so you can avoid any nasty fees. And to help us along the way, we're joined by Which senior writer, Grace Witherden, and from Which Travel, Joe Rhodes, who's a senior researcher. Hello to you both.
Hi, Lucia.
Hi.
Well, we're going to be talking about travel cards, credit cards, and of course, physical cash and a few other bits along the way. But first, can we start with why just using your regular bank card is probably not your best option? Grace, do you want to start us off?
So if you're heading away soon or you've got some trips planned, you definitely need to check that the card you want to take isn't going to charge you any fees. Now, there are 3 fees to watch out for when you go abroad. So for purchases, you'll usually pay a non-sterling transaction fee, and this is the fee charged for converting the local currency, and this applies every single time you use your card to pay. Now, the worst debit cards add a non-sterling purchase fee on top. This is often a fixed value, for example, £1.50, but it can also be a percentage of what you spend. And then if you're planning on withdrawing cash from a foreign ATM, you'll also incur a non-sterling transaction fee for the conversion, as well as a non-sterling cash fee. So those are the main charges to watch out for. It might be that your card is fine, but it's definitely worth checking those terms and conditions before you go.
There's quite a lot there, isn't it? It's quite confusing. There's quite a few things that you could be charged for. But do you have an example maybe of what this could look like if you buy something or take some cash out?
Yeah, so one of the worst offenders actually, so a standard TSB card, debit card, incurs fees of 2.99% plus £1 per transaction and a 1.5% for cash withdrawals. So basically making 2 £50 purchases and 3 £50 cash withdrawals would result in charges of £15.48.
Joe, is this a huge problem? Is this something you hear about travellers talking about, not being aware of these fees?
We do hear that, and with so many different charges that Grace has just explained, it's little surprise that people are being caught out. Some people might think they've seen that their cards are free for spending abroad, but they don't realise that it will charge them for withdrawing cash from an ATM. And then perhaps they're none the wiser until they get home and check their bank statement. And then there's charges from the banks themselves, depending on which country you're in. I often do this, hop around different ATMs in Spain, trying to avoid that charge. And it can be as much as €12 per transaction. So yeah, it's well worth sort of doing a bit of research.
And I've done that too, literally where you're walking from ATM to ATM trying to find one that doesn't have that charge. And we've singled out some pretty bad examples of debit cards, but there are some that are designed to be used abroad with no fees. So shall we start with those when we're talking about cards now? Which are these?
So yeah, in terms of debit cards, there is quite a few if you look around. So some of the top ones that we recommend at Which come from Starling and First Direct, because they are both Which recommended providers. Starling's never charged. It's a really good challenger bank, but the accounts must be operated via mobile banking app. It has no branches, so it's not, that it might not be for everyone, that type of account. The same with First Direct, actually. They don't have any branches either. And they actually did previously charge for foreign transaction fees up until last summer. They only got rid of it last summer. So it might be that you actually already have one of these cards and you've not been aware of the changes in a year. So they basically scrapped that last year. So that's great. They can still be used. We also recommend Monzo, again, like a really popular challenger bank. Again, no branches if that's something that you care about. And Chase as well, actually. Chase by JP Morgan has no fees. So that's also another challenger one. But I know I've mentioned some challenger brands here. There are also some normal, some more of the big four that won't offer fees, but you might need to be paying for like the premium version of the account. So for example, like Lloyds. So from July, actually, they've made it free, but only if you have its silver and platinum accounts, which are the premium ones. But if you're interested in the perks, that might also be worth it. So yeah, luckily we actually do have a big table on our website of all the debit cards that don't charge, and you can also see the cash limits. So some, for example, have a limit. You're allowed to withdraw with ATMs. You're allowed to updraw, say like under £200 in Europe. But if you go over, then you'll be charged a fee. So those things are also worth looking out for.
And we'll get a link to that in the description of today's show. And there are also lots of credit cards. If you prefer to use a credit card than a debit card, we've talked about some of these quite recently on the show, actually, haven't we, Grace? But which ones do we recommend for spending abroad?
Yeah, so we have free Best Buy credit cards that we recommend. So these are ones that have gone through like higher checks by us, because we checked their customer score in our annual survey. So we think they offer really good customer service as well as you can spend fee-free overseas. So the top three that we recommend at Which are the Halifax Clarity credit card. This always comes up top, also has quite a low, below average APR, representative APR. We also recommend the Barclaycard Rewards Visa. And one perk of that is that you also can earn some cash back on that card, as we discussed a few weeks ago on the podcast. And BIP credit card, you might not have heard of that one. It's a bit less popular, but it's also a really, really good pick for spending abroad. We also have, again, a wider table with other cards which are good to use, but these are Best Buys by Which.
Is there one card that you would say, if you were speaking to your friend over dinner, asking you, what card should I get? Is there one card that stands out for you as being particularly good?
I definitely think either the Halifax or the Barclaycard are really good, because they both, as I said, like they both have the below average representative APR, which means you're obviously that's the interest incurred. Obviously with credit cards, we do recommend paying off them in full every month anyway. But if you did have to carry over a balance, at least you're being charged slightly less interest with those. And
what about withdrawing cash with these credit cards? How does that work?
So if you withdraw cash on your credit card, you'll typically start incurring interest straight away. So it's not at the end of your statement, it's straight away. And that means that even if you do pay off your statement in full at the end of each month, you might still have actually been charged interest. And there's a small risk of harming your credit rating, as it might appear on your credit score. So it's something that we don't typically recommend. I think we would say that it might be best to withdraw cash abroad on a debit card rather than a credit card.
Very useful to know. And what about finally on this Section 75? Are you still protected on purchases abroad?
So Section 75 does still apply abroad, which is really good to know. So this means you have that protection if you purchase something more than £100 and up to £30,000, which means that you can reclaim the money from your credit card provider if the retailer doesn't make good. So this is actually really handy if you're abroad and you're making a big purchase. Just to have that extra protection, I think it can definitely give you peace of mind. Another good reason to have sort of a credit card, if you're abroad, if you're thinking, oh, I don't need a credit card, like I've just got my debit card. Sometimes with car hire firms, it's actually best to have a travel credit card for that, because if you do have to put a deposit down, at least that's sort of easy to do on a credit card, and you don't really notice the money missing, sort of returned before your statement. So sometimes with those situations, it is more handy to have a credit card.
Oh, I should just say that you mentioned car hire there. The next episode of our sister podcast, Get Answers, is on car hire and it's out on the 19th of August. So do check that out. Now, we've covered debit and credit cards so far, but after the break, we'll be chatting about other types of cards, getting the best deal on foreign currency, and whether traveller's checks are still relevant in 2024. That's next. Welcome back to the show. Now, before we get back to it, if you're enjoying our advice, we have a special offer to get 50% off a Which membership. So that's from £39.50 for a full year's access to Which Digital, where you'll get access to all of our product reviews, the Which app, the digital edition of the magazine, as well as personalised buying advice. And to find out more about this brilliant offer, just click the link in the episode show notes. Now, can we talk about physical currency, Jo? So here in the UK, we're definitely moving towards a more cashless society. We've talked about it a lot on the podcast over the years, actually. But what about overseas? In some of the most, common holiday destinations, are they also making the switch?
The world is definitely moving in that direction, but some countries are going faster than others. So it really depends where you're going. Cash is still king in places like Egypt and Morocco, for example. Even Germany and Austria are still fairly wedded to cash. So you may find your card isn't accepted in some of the shops and restaurants there.
Yeah, I was going to say with that, actually, I'm so bad. For the last few times I've been away, I've always just been like, I've got my Monzo. That's fine. I don't need any cash. So I don't think about it as much as I used to a few years ago. But my boyfriend actually went out to Germany recently, and it was all cash in all of the sort of like the fan bars for the Euros. And he didn't actually get out enough with him. And I think he wanted like a pizza one night, and they said it was cash only, and he didn't have enough, and they wouldn't accept his card. So I actually definitely think it's worth like researching this before you go, because I'm definitely in the mindset of like when I've been to Europe thinking, oh, it's fine, they accept card, but actually that's not always the case.
I was in Spain a few weeks ago, and I did exactly the same thing. I didn't bring any cash with me, and actually I think we were fine. I don't think any of us did, although my partner's younger sister was there and she came with her cash. I feel like maybe it's quite a kind of the thing that maybe her mum said you should bring cash with you. It's definitely something that I always used to do. And it used to be one of those kind of golden rules. You just go on holiday, you get your cash from the post office. But now obviously we're going to talk about the best way to get it. So if you're going somewhere a little more niche or, even just off the beaten track, is it wise then to have at least some cash in your wallet now?
Definitely. I think wherever you go, it's a good idea to have some local currency with you. It may be that you need it for buses or taxis. It's also handy for tipping as well. Things like shopping or eating at local markets, one of my favourite things to do on holiday. You're going to need cash for that as well. And while the big international hotels and big restaurants will always take plastic, having a bit of change in your pocket can get you out of trouble if you need it and unlock some more authentic travel experiences as well.
Absolutely. That's really true, actually. And I completely see that when you're buying from a market, you don't really want to have to ask if they'll take your credit card or, and it does make it much easier and kind of quicker. You don't have to worry about it. So when you're looking to get cash out ahead of going on holiday, what's your advice?
Yeah, so it's definitely worth comparing deals before you go. I have been too guilty of, just going to the currency place in my local shopping centre. But actually, if you do your research, you can check the rates and you can usually order it online and then either collect it from them. So I actually think it's worth a few days before, maybe even a week before, if it's like a more rare type of currency, going by and ordering it and actually doing some research. It's really easy to like compare the rates online. It's not like a hard task.
Yeah, and on top of that as well, it's worth paying for your currency with cash or a debit card to avoid any extra credit card fees. Also check your travel insurance. You don't want to take out more cash than you're covered for with your policy in case it's lost or stolen. And then bear in mind as well, if you're keeping some money at the hotel, always try to lock it away in the safe. And when you're on the move, consider carrying it in a money belt for some extra protection as well.
And Jo, can we just talk about exchanging at the airport? It's always been a big no-no. Is it still something that we'd never recommend?
That's right. Yeah, if you've left it that late, you're pretty much out of options. Airports know that. They rarely offer the most competitive rates. They've got a captive audience of holiday makers right there. So they have little incentive to. The last time we checked, we found that you could end up with €115 less when changing up £500 at the terminal compared with buying that currency on the high street before you get there. So yeah, the differences can be really quite stark.
Yeah, I feel like if you're at the airport as well, like there's enough to stress about without queuing up for currency. Like I always see queues there and I'm just like, oh, I don't want to be dealing with this right now, as well as like heading to my gate and stuff. So I even just think for like organisational purposes, it's like, best to get that before.
So if you are already abroad and you need some cash, I suppose you might go to an ATM, then you might be charged a currency conversion fee. I mean, what's your advice here?
It's best to always turn this down and choose to pay in the local currency instead. If you opt to convert, the ATM basically sets its own exchange rate, which is often a lot worse than the one offered by your own bank or card provider. And they do tend to, sometimes they'll ask you several times. So just keep saying no, basically.
Yeah, definitely. If you're at an ATM, and also if you're like paying for food in a restaurant, you get like the card terminal, sometimes it comes up, do you wish to like pay in the local currency? And sometimes it can be a bit confusing, and like I think I've got flustered before and just pick like no, even though like that's what I want to do. So I don't know, I always feel like there's things like that to try and catch you out, but basically you always need to pay in that local currency.
And there are a couple of things I'd like to mention before we wrap up, and one of them is prepaid cards. So we've already talked about debit and credit cards, but what are the benefits of a prepaid card?
So prepaid cards, I like to think of them as something that were probably used more. But I used to use them when I was a teenager, because I would put my money on my like post office money card, and that would be it for my holiday. Because I think back then there were perhaps less debit cards which offered fee-free spending abroad. So I think it was a bit more of the thing to do, to have card as well as cash. So basically, a prepaid card is you'll put some money on that card, but you're locking that exchange rate before you go. You can usually put multiple currencies on one card. So they're good for that purpose. And some people like them because they help you budget better, because you could put your allocated budget. You could put €200 on this card. That's all you're spending. There's nothing else on that card. And, I guess with a debit card, it's similar, but there's always the risk that you could go into your overdraft or something. And then, so I've just talked about multi-currency prepaid cards, but there's also sterling prepaid cards, and these offer the most flexibility as you load up your card with pounds, and then each time you spend or withdraw cash, the pounds will be converted to the required currency at the exchange rate on the day. So again, with this, you're not really locking in the money in advance, but they do offer good flexibility. There are also a few providers that do this. You can use like Wise. I've also been looking up another currency app recently at the start of the year called Zing. These are all sort of other things you can use, but they require a bit of legwork. So you might have to load it up and then decide what currency you want. They're often all app-based as well, which you might not want to do if you're traveling. You know, if you've not got data or like a good Wi-Fi connection, like you might not want to be doing that. But they do offer some flexibility.
So prepaid cards, worth considering, but possibly a thing of the past. It feels like they might be. And from one of those to another, maybe. Finally, I just want to talk about traveller's checks. Honestly, that's not a phrase I've used recently. I mean, I haven't spoken about traveller's checks for years. And I don't even know if we've spoken about it on the podcast when we've talked about travel money in recent shows. Personally, I've never used them. For anyone not familiar, what are they, Jo? Are they still something still useful today?
Well, sadly, I am old enough to remember them. It takes me back to backpacking in my youth when I used them back then. They do still exist. They're pre-printed checks for a set amount of money, and they can be exchanged for cash while you're away. They're obviously safer to carry around than cash. They come with a serial number, so if you note that down for every check, they can actually be replaced if they happen to be lost or stolen while you're away. So that's a good thing. The cons are, it's a little bit outdated, and that can mean it's a little bit of a hassle to find somewhere that will actually exchange them, at least, and even less places that will actually accept them as a form of payment. And it can be costly as well. So when you try to exchange them, you may find you're hit with not only a foreign exchange rate, but a commission for these transactions as well.
So interesting, isn't it? Are they actually being used by anyone these days?
I guess some people might like that security, as I say, that sort of safety of knowing they're not carrying a bundle of cash around. Probably people that used them back in the day maybe still like the idea, but I think they're really going the way of the dinosaurs.
Yeah, it does feel like that, doesn't it? Well, and we've mentioned so many alternatives, which are, as you just said, Grace, so quick to set up. So all the debit cards, the credit cards we've mentioned today, maybe even a prepaid card, does sound like it could be the better option. Well, thank you both so much for joining us today. It's been super interesting and so useful. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Well, a huge thank you again to Grace and Jo for coming on the show today, and to you for listening to this week's episode of the Which Money podcast. If you enjoyed today's show, please do hit subscribe to make sure you catch our new episodes as soon as they drop. For daily money news and advice, you can find us on social media at Which Money and online at which.co.uk/money. And we also have a free money newsletter, which is delivered to your inbox every Monday. To sign up, visit which.co.uk/money newsletter. This episode of the Which Money podcast was written and presented by me, Lucia Ariano, and produced and edited by James Rowe.
Want to stay ahead of fraudsters and across the latest scams? At Which, we helped prevent an estimated £1.8 million in scam losses last year thanks to our Scam Alert newsletter. And each week we provide more information on the latest scam activity, helping protect you, your family and your friends. Stay in the know and avoid falling victim to scammers by joining over 450,000 people already signed up to our free Which Scam Alerts. To join them, head to which.co.uk/scamalert and sign up today.